National Assembly Speaker Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula has declined a request by the Democratic Alliance to set up an ad hoc committee to investigate allegations of theft at President Cyril Ramaphosa's game farm. The request was made by the DA leader John Steenhuisen. Steenhuisen wrote to the Speaker requesting that she establish the committee in terms of National Assembly Rule 253, subsection 1B. Now, the rule allows for the establishment of such a committee during the adjournment of the Assembly for a period of more than 14 days after consulting the Chief Whip and the most senior whip of each of the other parties. In her letter, the Speaker declined the request, arguing that Rule 253 sets out requirements for the establishment of an ad hoc committee, and that one of them is the performance of a specific task. While the request proposes a committee on Phalaphala farm, it goes in to list various distinct tasks for investigation. She says that the nature of the proposed investigation is understandable. However, some of the tasks proposed are arguably still within the purview of other entities or institutions, including law enforcement. Well, to discuss this issue a little further, we're now joined by the federal leader of the Democratic Alliance, John Steenhuisen. A very good evening to you, Mr. Steenhuisen. Your reaction to the National Assembly Speaker's declining your request for this ad hoc committee?
Good evening to you, and good evening to the listeners. It's great to be with you this evening. I think it's an act of remarkable parliamentary cowardice for the Speaker not to accede to the establishment of an ad hoc committee. I think it was very, very clear that the purview of such committee would be to probe the Phalaphala matter and the ancillary issues related to it. There was a very specific task that would be assigned to that committee. And it seems that once again, Parliament is being reduced to a presidential protection unit rather than a true reflection of the constitutional obligation of Parliament to hold the executive to account. And I'm very disappointed that the Speaker has chosen this particular avenue this evening. And I think that she is failing in her duty to note both the findings of Mogoeng and the Nkandla judgment, as well as the several findings of the Zondo Commission, where they found that Parliament was derelict in its duty to hold the executive accountable. And I really think that this is damaging Parliament, and I think it's damaging the whole notion of executive accountability in South Africa.
You said that there was a specific task. She's saying that you made a request for a number of tasks to be completed, which is against Rule 253.
Well, I think that she's misread the rule completely. There was only one task, and that was get to the bottom of the Phalaphala matter, and that would have involved summoning the head of the VIP protection unit. It would have involved the summoning of various other members of the President's staff to be able to come to Parliament and explain why the crime was never reported, why that the VIP protection unit was abused to facilitate the recovery of private funds rather than public funds, and to establish what the conflict of interest would have been through the President using a publicly funded protection service to recover private business debts or private business theft. This is not a facility that's available for ordinary South Africans. It's a specific facility that's available to the President. And we believe it is an abuse of power to use the Presidential Protection Unit to pursue the recovery of private funds that revolve around the President's business interests rather than its interests as the head of state. And I believe all of these matters are firmly within the purview of Parliament. They firmly fall under the requirements of Parliament to hold the executive accountable in terms of its constitutional mandate. And I think it is a huge dereliction of duty that the Speaker has chosen this avenue and has clearly learned nothing from Nkandla and from the Zondo Commission.
Help us as viewers and the public to understand, because she's saying that a lot of this could still be investigated by other entities like the police, etc. Why would Parliament get involved in something that the police maybe could do and the MPA could investigate?
Well, I think it's very clear from the Nkandla judgment by Mogoeng that there is nothing stopping Parliament from indulging in its own probes in terms of a violation of the Executive Ethics Act, in terms of an abuse of executive authority, and of holding the executive accountable. There's no such thing as parallel investigations. Parliament has an obligation in terms of the Constitution to hold the executive accountable. The President has not answered the questions that have been submitted to him in Parliament. The Justice Portfolio Committee has been denied the opportunity to be able to convene and interrogate the Justice Minister, particularly in relation to the allegations by the Namibian authorities that requests were sent for assistance with the criminal matters that were not forthcoming from the South African government. And I believe that there are two distinct roles here. There's one of executive accountability, and that executive accountability resides in Parliament. And there's a criminal liability, and that revolves around the policing authorities in South Africa. But just because one is doing one's duty doesn't mean the other should not be conducting its duty as required by the Constitution. And this was the same mistake that Parliament made in the Nkandla matter, and it's the same mistake that Parliament made through many of the aspects that have been revealed in the Zondo Commission, where there were parallel investigations taking place, and Parliament was found to have been derelict in its duty. I think what's happening here is the Speaker's being reduced once again to becoming a presidential protection unit rather than a unit that is responsible for holding the executive accountable in South Africa.
So the Speaker has spoken. Is that the end of the matter, or what do you intend to do?
No, I believe that it's unreasonable and irrational for the Speaker to decline a request for an ad hoc committee to be created, particularly when, as this matter transcends a number of portfolio committees. It now transcends the Justice Portfolio Committee, the Policing Portfolio Committee, as well as the presidency, the office of the President within Parliament. I believe that it is certainly right for an ad hoc committee to discuss this particular matter, and I think it's irrational and unreasonable for the Speaker to decline such a request. And so we will be considering in the next 24 hours our legal options in this matter to hold the Speaker liable for unreasonable and illogical behavior in terms of fulfilling and discharging the constitutional obligations that are placed on the Speaker to ensure that Parliament performs its functions in terms of the Constitution. And so you can well expect litigation around this matter. It's not something we're going to simply let the Speaker get away with. We've seen what happens when, and the Zondo Commission has unpacked this in great detail, when Parliament abrogates its responsibility to the people of South Africa, and we're not going to allow this to happen again. And so we will be taking every single one of those options forward from a legal and a parliamentary perspective to force the Speaker to ensure that Parliament fulfills its role and discharges its constitutional obligation.
All right, Mr. Steenhuisen, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us on the programme.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
Good night. That's John Steenhuisen, who's the federal leader of the Democratic Alliance, upset that the Speaker of the National Assembly, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, has declined their request to instigate an ad hoc committee to investigate the matter surrounding President Ramaphosa's Phalaphala game farm.